Good morning and welcome to Business Buzz. Coming up, Nigerian stocks fall for a second straight week as the year's record rally cools. Government borrowing jumps by more than 75%, raising fresh questions for inflation, interest rates, and the naira. The International Monetary Fund warns that tit-for-tat trade warfare now threatens the global economy. Mines keep the Strait of Hormuz operating at half its normal traffic, even as a ceasefire holds. And the central bank orders banks and fintechs to bring their customer data home. I am Louisa Asidi. Stay with us. We begin with the markets and a second straight week of selling on the Nigerian exchange. The all-share index fell 1.65% over the week to close just above 232,000 points. That decline wiped about 2.4 trillion naira from the value of listed companies in a single week. It carried a historic sting. The market's return for the year has now slipped below 50% for the first time since April, when an extraordinary monthly rally first pushed it past that mark. Analysts call this a correction, profit-taking after one of the strongest runs in the market's history, not a collapse. The selling was led by oil and gas, which lost almost 10% on the week, and by the big industrial names. Aradel fell 19%, while the major cement and power shares each shed about 10%. Banking was the one bright spot, the only major sector to rise on renewed buying in the large Tier 1 lenders. Among individual stocks, Mike Nichols led the gainers, up more than 26%. Trans-Nationwide Express led the fallers, down by a similar margin. Trading was thinner than the week before, and decliners outnumbered gainers by more than 2-1. The next real test comes in late July, when second quarter company earnings begin to land. Analysts say those results are the catalyst that could put a floor under the correction. On the currency market, the parallel or street rate held broadly flat at around 1,400 naira to the dollar. For an economy that still imports much of its fuel, its medicine, and its industrial inputs in dollars, a stable street rate is the figure to watch in the days ahead. Now to the public finances and a sharp jump in how much the government is borrowing. Fresh central bank data shows credit to the federal government rising to just over 40 trillion naira in May, up from about 23 trillion a year earlier. That is an increase of more than 75% in a single year. In 1 month alone, from April to May, it rose by nearly 800 billion naira. Over the same period, lending to businesses and households grew only moderately. When the government borrows on this scale, banks prefer to hold safe government debt rather than lend to factories, farms, and shops. Economists call this crowding out. It also keeps the cost of money high. The central bank's benchmark rate still stands at 26.5% as it tries to hold down inflation. For an ordinary household, that means borrowing for a home, a car, or a small business stays expensive, even as the naira's purchasing power is squeezed at the market. Economists call this fiscal dominance. The government's borrowing needs driving monetary policy rather than the other way around. It's time now for a break. We'll be back in a moment with more Business Buzz. Welcome back to the wider world economy now and the picture that frames much of Nigerians' own. The outgoing chief economist of the International Monetary Fund Pierre-Olivier Gourenches, has warned that tit-for-tat economic warfare between nations now threatens global growth. He pointed to countries exploiting choke points and critical minerals for political advantage and warned that in the end, such moves are self-defeating. The clearest choke point remains the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow Gulf waterway that normally carries about a fifth of the world's oil. The head of the Japanese shipping line, NYK, warns that mines in the strait will hold traffic to less than half its normal level for months, even with a United States and Iran ceasefire in place. Iran is estimated to have laid around 80 mines in the main shipping lanes. For now, the prospect of a lasting deal has pushed Brent crude down sharply from more than $120 a barrel to below its pre-war level. For Nigeria, this cuts both ways. Cheaper crude reduces the government's dollar earnings, but it can ease the pressure at the fuel pump. That same energy shock is reshaping transport across the continent. The war in the Middle East has driven a surge in demand for electric motorbikes and buses across Africa, a market dominated by China. In East Africa, the daily petrol cost for a motorbike taxi has risen more than 20% since the war began. An electric bike can cover the same distance for less than half that price. Startups building charging and battery swapping networks have raised around $300 million in the past month alone. And the shift may reach Nigeria directly. One company says it now plans to build lithium battery plants in Nigeria and Kenya, turning Africa resources into African products rather than importing finished batteries from China. Now to a major policy shift at home in digital finance. The central bank has ordered banks, fintechs, and payment firms to store all payment data generated in Nigeria inside the country by the 1st of January 2027. Industry estimates suggest more than 90% of regulated firms currently rely on foreign cloud platforms run by Amazon, Google, and Microsoft. Supporters said the move keeps hundreds of millions of dollars a year inside Nigeria, eases pressure on foreign reserves, and creates local jobs. But the open question is power, whether local data centers can run reliably given the country's electricity supply. Institutions now have less than a year to move some of the most sensitive systems in Nigeria's financial sector back home. More business buzz right after this. Staying with finance and a sign of how fast customer lending is growing, the Customer Protection Commission has granted full approval to 48 more digital lenders. That brings the number of fully approved loan apps to 505, up from 457 at the start of the year. In all, more than 1,000 individual apps now sit under the regulator's watch. More than 100 are on the watch list, and dozens have already been removed from the Google Play Store for breaking the rules. The Commission says it is trying to clean up a sector long associated with harassment and the public shaming of borrowers who fall behind. Breaking the rules now carries fines of up to 100 million naira or a share of a firm's turnover. And a deal that deepens the role of digital dollars in African payments. The blockchain company Ripple has taken an undisclosed stake in the Nigerian payments firm Flutterwave in a round that values Flutterwave at around $3.25 billion. Flutterwave will build Ripple's dollar-backed stablecoin into its network across 34 African countries. The aim is faster, cheaper, cross-border payments in a region where sending money still often costs more than 8% of the amount sent and can take days to clear. For an exporter in Onitsha or a freelancer in Asaba paid by an overseas client, the promise is funds that arrive in minutes, not days. The deal comes as Nigerian regulators begin to treat stablecoins as part of the country's payments future rather than a thing apart. Now to a warning over trade policy. The Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprise has cautioned against a Senate proposal to ban textile fabric imports. The Senate says a ban would revive Nigeria's once thriving textile mills and create jobs and lift government revenue. But the business group wants it could do the opposite, threatening the livelihoods of an estimated 10 million Nigerians who work in fashion, tailoring, and garment making. Its argument is that those tailors and designers depend on imported fabric to do their work. Nigeria imported about 1 trillion naira of textiles last year. The better route, the group says, is to make local textiles competitive through cheaper financing, steadier power, and reviving cotton farming, rather than simply shutting imports out. We will be back in a moment with more business buzz.
Dott Entertainment, your weekly dose of pure fun, airing every Monday to Friday, 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. Saturdays, 10 p.m. to 11 p.m. only on Dott TV.
We impose extra burden on the masses. I feel your pain.
Only humility will lead us to unity, and unity will lead us to peace.
Go to the market and sell your products.
From Harrison, that is a massive world record. Martinelli goes, boys, out of his goal. Martinelli, this will be 3 for Arsenal.
To the international brief, Apple is lobbying the United States government for clearance to buy memory chips from a Chinese company that sits on a Pentagon blacklist. The move follows a steep rise in chip prices driven by demand from artificial intelligence data centers. That increase forced Apple to raise the price of its Macs and iPads this week, winning more than $260 billion from its market value in a single day. For Nigerian buyers where Apple products already carry a heavy markup once duties and the exchange rates are added, any further increase lands harder still. Still in technology, Google has capped the social media company Meta's use of its Gemini artificial intelligence models after Meta sought more computing power than Google could supply. It is a striking sign of how far demand for artificial intelligence is now outpacing the world's computing capacity. Even the largest technology firms are rationing access to it. To Argentina, where the Libertarian president Javier Milei is preparing a so-called golden passport scheme. The plan offers citizenship in exchange for a donation of about $500,000 or the purchase of $1 million in government bonds. It is part of a push to raise dollars and pay down the country's heavy debts. Argentina has been locked out of global capital markets since a debt restructuring 6 years ago and is now turning to the world's wealthy for cash. And to Europe, where the bloc is split over Russian energy. The Baltic states are urging the European Union to speed up a ban on Russian oil now that fears of an energy crunch from the Iran war have eased. But the head of a major Spanish import hub is urging the opposite, a delay, warning the bloc not to swap its reliance on Russia for an over-reliance on the United States. That is Business Buzz for today. Thank you for joining us. I am Louisa Asili.